The day I overheard Uncle Chidi call me the mistake that ruined everything, I was 12 years old, crouched behind the kitchen door with my school report card clutched in trembling hands. I had come to show him my grades, all A's, hoping for once he might smile at me, maybe even say he was proud. Instead, I heard him on the phone with someone, his voice thick with bitterness. Every time I look at Kene's face, I'm reminded of what I lost. 15 years of feeding him, clothing him, paying his school fees, while my own children went without. But what choice did I have? My brother died and left me with his burden. I ran to my room that night and didn't come out until morning. Life in Uncle Chidi's house in Lagos had always been hard, but hearing those words made everything finally make sense. Why his children, my cousins Adeyeze and Obi, got new clothes for Christmas while I wore hand-me-downs. Why they ate meat with their jollof rice while I got only the rice. Why Uncle Chidi never attended my school events, never asked about my day, never looked me in the eye without that shadow of resentment crossing his face. My parents died when I was 3, a car accident on the Enugu-Onitsha Expressway that I was too young to remember. Uncle Chidi took me in because tradition demanded it, because our extended family expected it, because refusing would have brought shame. But he made sure I knew every single day that I was an obligation, an unwanted guest in what should have been my home. I learned to make myself small, to eat quickly and quietly, to excel in school because maybe, just maybe, good grades would earn me a moment of approval, to pretend I didn't notice when Aunt Ngozi served everyone else first and gave me what was left, to swallow the hurt when Uncle Chidi proudly introduced Adeyeze and Obi to his friends, but forgot to mention me standing right there beside them. What I didn't know then, what nobody knew, was that Uncle Chidi was hiding something, a secret that would eventually crack open like thunder, revealing that everything I believed about my place in that house, about my parents' deaths, about who I really was, had been built on lies. But that discovery was still 5 years away, and those 5 years would test me in ways I never imagined. Stay with me, because when the truth finally came out, it would change everything. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after my JAM results. I scored 287, high enough for any university in Nigeria. My hands shook as I opened it, standing in the compound while Uncle Chidi watched from the veranda, his newspaper folded in his lap. University of Lagos regrets to inform you. I read it 3 times, unable to believe the words. Rejected. But my score was excellent. I had listed Unilag as my first choice, studying computer science, a course that could change my life, pull me out of poverty, make something of myself. "What does it say?" Uncle Chidi called out, though something in his tone suggested he already knew. I didn't get admitted," I stammered, walking toward him. "But, Uncle, my score was high enough. There must be a mistake. Can we go to the admissions office? Can we—" "There's no money for that." He snapped his paper open again, a wall between us. "Besides, what makes you think university is for everyone? Perhaps it's time you learned a trade. My friend has a mechanic shop in Oshodi. You can start there next month." "A mechanic shop?" The words felt like stones in my throat. "But, Uncle, I've worked so hard. I've been top of my class for 5 years. I can get a scholarship. I can—" "Enough." His voice cracked like a whip. "Do you know how much I've already spent on you? 17 years of feeding and clothing you, and you want more? You want university fees, accommodation, books, transport? Where do you think that money comes from?" Aunt Ngozi appeared at the door, wiping her hands on her wrapper. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Adeyeze, now studying business administration at Lagos State University, peered out from behind her mother, a strange expression on her face. Was that guilt? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my parents, trying to remember anything about them beyond the few photographs I had hidden in my box. My father had been a civil servant, I knew that much. My mother, a teacher. Surely they would have wanted more for me than a mechanic shop in Oshodi. I was staring at the ceiling when I heard voices from Uncle Chitty's bedroom, urgent, hushed, arguing. I crept closer to the door. You promised this would end after secondary school. The boy deserves to know. He deserves nothing, Uncle Chitty hissed, and you'll keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for this family. Everything we have, everything depends on... A door slammed somewhere, and the voices stopped. I retreated to my room, my heart pounding. Deserves to know what? What did everything depend on? The questions burned in my mind, but I had no answers. Not yet. I didn't know that Adeaze had already started asking her own questions, or that she would soon go digging where she shouldn't. I didn't know that in Uncle Chitty's locked drawer there were documents, papers about my parents, about their estate, about money that would unravel everything. I didn't know that my rejection from university wasn't bad luck or insufficient scores. It was sabotage. 2 months into my apprenticeship at the mechanic shop, my hands were permanently stained with grease, and my dreams felt like they were dying slowly, one engine repair at a time. I came home each evening exhausted, smelling of oil and metal, while Adeze left for her university lectures in pressed clothes, her textbooks under her arm like badges of honor. But something had changed in Adeze. She watched me differently now, not with the casual indifference of before, but with something that looked like pity mixed with anger. She started asking me strange questions. Kene, do you remember anything about your father's work? What he did exactly? Uncle said he was just a civil servant. Why? She'd shake her head and walk away, leaving me more confused than before. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Uncle Chidi had traveled to Enugu for a family meeting, and Aunt Ngozi had gone to the market with Obi. I was supposed to be at the shop, but Oga Peter had sent me home early. Business was slow. When I arrived, I found Adeze in Uncle Chidi's bedroom, crouched in front of his opened drawer, papers scattered around her. Adeze, what are you... Shut the door, she whispered urgently. Quickly. I hesitated, then closed the door behind me. My cousin's hands were shaking as she held up a document. Kene, sit down. You need to see this. We shouldn't be in here. If Uncle Chidi finds out... Uncle Chidi has been lying to you, to all of us. Her voice cracked. Your father wasn't just a civil servant, Kene. He was a senior director at the Ministry of Works. And your mother didn't just teach. She owned 3 schools, private schools, expensive ones. The room seemed to tilt. What? No, that can't be. Look, she thrust papers at me. Property documents, bank statements from 2008, the year my parents died, asset inventories. My father's name, Kenechukwu Okafor Sr., was printed across the top of page after page. Properties in Lagos, Enugu, and Abuja, business investments, school ownership documents, numbers that made my head spin. They were wealthy, Kene, very wealthy. But Uncle Chidi always said they left nothing, that he took me in out of pure charity, that there was no money, that... He lied. Adeze's eyes filled with tears. There's more. Look at this. She handed me another document, a will, my parents' will. It stated clearly that their entire estate was to be held in trust for me, their only child, with Uncle Chidi named as trustee until I turned 18. I turned 18 4 months ago. Where did all of it go? My voice didn't sound like my own. Adeze pulled out more papers, transfer documents, sale receipts, all bearing Uncle Chidi's signature. He sold everything, the properties, the schools, the investments. Over the past 15 years, he liquidated your entire inheritance. Our house, your father's house in Ikoyi, my university fees, your trust fund, the car Papa drives, bought with money from selling your mother's schools. The room was spinning now. Everything I'd worn, every meal I'd eaten like a beggar at their table, every time I'd felt grateful for their charity, it had all been mine, my money, my parents' legacy. There's something else, Adieze said quietly, pulling out one more paper. Your university application. I found this too. It was a letter from Uncle Chidi to the Unilag admissions office, written on official letterhead he'd somehow obtained, requesting that my application be rejected, citing family reasons and character concerns. All lies. He had sabotaged me deliberately, ensuring I wouldn't go to university, wouldn't get educated enough to start asking questions, wouldn't become independent enough to discover what he'd done. I looked at my cousin through tears I didn't remember starting to cry. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because it's not right," she whispered. "I've watched him treat you like trash your whole life, and I said nothing. I benefited from it, from your money, your inheritance. We all did. But you turn 18 and suddenly he's desperate to keep you uneducated, working in a mechanic shop where you'll never think to ask questions?" She wiped her eyes. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Outside, we heard a car door slam. Uncle Chidi was home early. We barely had time to shove the papers back into the drawer before we heard Uncle Chidi's footsteps on the stairs. Adiez grabbed my arm, her eyes wild with panic, and pulled me out of the bedroom. We made it to the corridor just as he reached the top of the landing. "What are you two doing up here?" His eyes narrowed, darting between us. "I was just asking Kene to help me move some boxes in my room," Adiez said, her voice steadier than I expected. "Heavy textbooks." Uncle Chidi studied us for a long moment, then grunted and walked past us into his bedroom. We heard him moving around inside, and my heart nearly stopped when the sounds paused. Was he checking the drawer? That night, I couldn't eat. I sat at dinner pushing rice around my plate while the family talked about Obi's upcoming WAEC exams. Every time I looked at Uncle Chidi, rage burned in my chest so hot I thought I might explode. This man had stolen my entire life, had turned me into a beggar in my own father's house, eating meals bought with my own inheritance. "Kene, you're not eating," Aunt Ngozi observed, though her voice was tentative. "Are you feeling well?" I looked up at her, and something in my expression made her look away quickly. Did she know? Had she always known? For 3 days, I said nothing. Adiez had hidden copies of the most important documents in her room, but we both knew confronting Uncle Chidi was dangerous. He was a man who had built 15 years of lies. He wouldn't give up his stolen wealth without a fight. But on the 4th day, I came home from the mechanic shop to find Uncle Chidi waiting for me in the sitting room, his face like thunder. "Sit down," he commanded. Something in his tone told me he knew. Somehow he'd figured it out. "You've been going through my things." It wasn't a question. My mouth went dry. Don't lie to me." He stood up, his bulk suddenly menacing. "You think I don't know my own drawer was disturbed? You think I'm stupid?" The fear I'd lived with for 17 years urged me to back down, to apologize, to make myself small again. But something else rose up inside me, something that had been buried under years of degradation and manipulation. "You stole from me." My voice came out quiet but steady. "My parents left me everything, and you stole it all." The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt Ngozi appeared in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. Obi peered in from behind her. Uncle Chidi's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, then something calculating. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously calm. Your parents left you nothing but debt. I saved you from the streets. I clothed you, fed you, gave you a roof over your head when no one else would. And this is how you repay me? With accusations? I saw the documents, the will, the property papers, the bank statements. You saw papers you're too uneducated to understand. He took a step toward me. You think any court will believe you over me? You're nobody, Kene, an orphan with no education, no money, no proof. I have proof. Adeaze's voice came from the stairs. She descended slowly, holding a folder. Copies of everything: the will, the sale documents, the letter you wrote to Unilag, all of it. Uncle Chidi's face went pale, then purple with rage. You ungrateful! After everything I've given you! Given me with his money, Adeaze shouted back, and I'd never heard her raise her voice to her father before. Every single thing we have came from Kene's inheritance. We've been living off stolen money for 15 years. Get out of my house, Uncle Chidi said to me, his voice shaking. Get out right now. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. This isn't your house, I said, my voice stronger now. This is my father's house. You're living in my house, driving my car, spending my money, and I'm not going anywhere until I get back what's mine. Uncle Chidi lunged at me then, but Aunt Ngozi screamed and grabbed his arm. In the chaos that followed, shouting, crying, Obi backing away in shock, I stood my ground for the first time in my life. The war had begun, but I didn't know yet that Uncle Chidi had one final weapon, one desperate, dangerous move that would force me to make an impossible choice. The real battle was just beginning, and it would take everything I had to survive it. Uncle Chidi disappeared for 2 days after the confrontation. When he returned, he came with a lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Barrister Okonkwo, who carried a briefcase full of counter documents. Your uncle has agreed to a settlement, the lawyer announced, spreading papers across the dining table. He acknowledges certain irregularities in the management of your trust fund. He's willing to return a portion of the liquidated assets, 2 million naira, in exchange for your signature absolving him of any further claims. 2 million naira. It sounded like a fortune to someone who'd been living like a servant, but I'd seen the documents. My parents' estate had been worth over 50 million naira 15 years ago. Even accounting for expenses, Uncle Chidi had stolen tens of millions from me. That's less than 5% of what he took, Adeza said, standing beside me. She'd become my unexpected ally, my sister in truth rather than just in name. Barrister Okonkwo smiled coldly. Legal battles are expensive and lengthy, especially for a young man with no resources. Your uncle could tie this up in court for years. You'd need lawyers, money for filing fees, time away from work. Can you afford that? He was right, and we both knew it. I had nothing, no money for lawyers, nowhere to live if Uncle Chidi truly threw me out, no education to fall back on. But then Aunt Ngozi spoke up, her voice trembling. Tell him the rest, Chidi. Tell him what you're really offering. Uncle Chidi's jaw tightened. Ngozi, tell him. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. He's offering you a choice, Kene. Take the 2 million naira and leave quietly, or he'll produce documents claiming your father had massive debts, that the estate was worthless, that he's actually been supporting you from his own pocket all these years. He has friends in the ministry, people who will forge whatever papers he needs. You'll get nothing and be branded a liar. The room fell silent. This was Uncle Chidi's final play, intimidation backed by the threat of complete destruction. I looked at the man who'd raised me like a burden, who'd stolen my inheritance and my dignity. I thought about my parents, their hard work, their dreams for me. I thought about 15 years of scraps and hand-me-downs, of being made to feel grateful for what was already mine. Then I thought about the mechanic shop, about Olga Peter, who taught me not just to fix engines, but to understand how systems worked, how to diagnose problems, how to rebuild what was broken. "I'll take the 2 million," I said quietly. Uncle Chidi's shoulders relaxed. Barrister Okonkwo smiled and pushed the papers toward me. "But not as a settlement," I continued. "As a loan. I'm going to use it to hire my own lawyer, to take you to court properly, to get everything you stole from me. And when I win, not if, when, you'll lose everything. This house, the cars, your reputation, possibly your freedom." I stood up, leaving the unsigned papers on the table. "Adeeze has already made copies of all the documents. We've stored them in 3 different locations, including with a family friend who's a journalist. If anything happens to me, if I have any accidents, everything goes public. The newspapers will love this story. Wealthy man steals orphaned nephew's inheritance." Uncle Chidi's face had gone gray. "You're making a mistake, Kene. You're just a boy." "I'm 18 years old, the same age my father was when he left his village with nothing and built an empire. You taught me to be small, Uncle, but you forgot. I have my father's blood in my veins, not yours." I walked to the door, Adeeze following me. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. "I'll be staying with Adeeze's friend until this is sorted out. You'll hear from my lawyer next week. And Uncle Chidi, thank you." "Thank you?" He looked confused. "For the mechanic shop. You meant it as a punishment, as a way to keep me down. But Olga Peter taught me something valuable, how to fix things that are broken, how to rebuild from the ground up. That's exactly what I'm going to do with my life." 6 months later, I stood in a Lagos courtroom as the judge ruled in my favor. Uncle Chidi was ordered to return all remaining assets and face prosecution for fraud and embezzlement. The house was mine again. More importantly, my future was mine. I didn't move back into my father's house in Ikoi. Instead, I sold it and used part of the money to start a foundation offering free legal aid to orphans whose inheritances were being mismanaged. The rest went to my education. I enrolled at UNLAG to study computer science, finally. Adeeze visits me often. She's the only family I kept from that chapter of my life. Aunt Ngozi divorced Uncle Chidi and reached out to apologize, but some wounds need time to heal. Sometimes I think about that 12-year-old boy hiding behind the kitchen door, believing he was unwanted, believing he was a burden. I wish I could tell him that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth fighting for, that being raised like a burden doesn't mean you are one, that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but how you refuse to let their treatment define you. My name is Kenechukwu Okofor Jr., and this is my story. It's not just about stolen money or family betrayal. It's about every person who's ever been made to feel small, who's ever been told they don't deserve more, who's ever had to fight for what's rightfully theirs. The truth always comes out. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to drag it into the light. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think about justice and family, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the globe. Hit that like button if you believe the truth is always worth fighting for, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not a burden, they're a blessing. Your engagement helps stories like Kene's reach the people who need them most. Let's build a community of truth tellers and fighters. What are you waiting for? Like, comment your location, and share this now.